What is the Little Rock Crisis? It is no less than a model for all the struggle for equal rights by disadvantaged classes that has occurred since the beginning of recorded history. The Little Rock Crisis was a revolutionary part of the civil rights movement and was one of the most important advances in the development of education rights for African Americans. This historical event set the tone for the future and established responsibilities the government must uphold towards its citizens. Precedents for this event had been building up for several decades until culminating with this explosion in struggle and equality. The fight for equal rights had been brewing for many ages beforehand, with Plessy versus Ferguson declaring that all public institutions that were segregated must be equal, ending the most brutal portion of the Jim Crow establishment. With this victory in egalitarianism, an obvious next target was for equality in education. In 1954, the case of Brown versus Board of Education resulted in a ruling that segregation of public schools was unconstitutional, forcing schools across the nation to integrate. One affected school district was the Little Rock School District in Arkansas. This court ruling sent panic throughout Little Rock as the school board quickly tried to figure out a plan for integration that would satisfy both the United States government and the worried white community. The solution they found was the Blossom Plan, which involved the immediate desegregation of Little Rock Central and the eventual desegregation of Horace Mann High and Hall High. This solution was thought to be less than satisfactory by members of the NAACP due to gerrymandering by the school board, which caused a majority of blacks in Horace Mann and a majority of whites in Hall High. This was made even worse by the district's allowance of whites to transfer out of Horace Mann, but their forbiddance of blacks transferring into Hall High. Nevertheless, the plan was found to be better than nothing and was thus put into action. Little Rock Central was set to be integrated on September 4th, 1957, but a series of mishaps occurred on that day to prevent it from happening. A large group of angry white community members appeared on the scene to protest the integration, and they harassed the African students, or the Little Rock Nine as they were called. One of the 9 students recalls of that day, "They moved closer and closer. Somebody started yelling. I tried to see a friendly face somewhere in the crowd. Someone who could maybe help. I looked into the face of an old woman and it seemed a kind face, but when I looked at her again, she spat on me." The abuse the children received from the community on the day of integration, while sad and indicative of mainstream America's racist tendencies, was nowhere near as bad as the betrayal of their rights by the state government. Governor Orville Faubus sent in the Arkansas National Guard for the purpose of protecting the protesters. This was a clear shirking of his responsibilities as governor, and resulted in an intervention from an individual with a higher position in the United States government. This individual was President Dwight David Eisenhower. Dwight Eisenhower, prior to becoming president, was an esteemed general of the United States military, as well as supreme commander of the Allied forces in World War II. The United States military had been desegregated since President Harry S. Truman issued Executive Order 9981, and European militaries were integrated much earlier. Eisenhower's experience with commanding large, desegregated forces may have taught him that people of different races can work together for a common goal, influencing him to fight against segregation in America. Additionally, United States presidents have been increasingly trending toward treating African Americans equally ever since Lincoln set the slaves of America free, and Eisenhower was dutifully following this precedence. Examining this context provides a clear reasoning as to why President Eisenhower felt the need to defend the black students' rights in this situation, meeting with Governor Faubus in an attempt to fix the situation and allow them to attend school. In a telegram to the governor, Eisenhower said, "When I became president, I took an oath to support and defend the Constitution of the United States. The only assurance I can give you is that the federal Constitution will be upheld by me by every legal means at my command." Faubus refused to compromise, but President Eisenhower did not back down. Risking a second civil war in the process, the president sent in the Army's 101st Airborne Division and took direct control of Arkansas's National Guard, ensuring the governor could not abuse his powers and enabling the kids to finally make it to school. It was not a full victory for the Little Rock Nine, however, as they were harshly bullied once inside the school. They were verbally and physically assaulted by the white students, who faced no repercussions. But should any of the black students try to fight back, they were immediately suspended. Their families were even threatened, such as when groups of white people would call Melba Beals' house, as she was one of the 9, and say, "We're going to bomb your house. We're going to be right over." These injustices are reminders that even though a group may gain certain rights, it is the responsibility of the privileged groups who already hold those rights to accept them and not let their prejudice hold them back. Fortunately, many people in the United States were accepting of educational equality at the time, and some wrote to President Eisenhower to voice their support for the African American children. One woman wrote to the president, "This letter is just to let you know all decent Americans are behind you 100%. Please don't back down now." This positivity existed everywhere, even in places completely unexpected, like the high school itself. The editor of the school newspaper, prior to the event, put out an article that implored all students of the high school to react rationally and kindly to the new students. The article said, "Today the world is watching you, the students of Central High. They want to know what your reactions, behavior, and impulses will be concerning a matter now before us. This is the chance the youth of America has been waiting for. Through an open mind, broad outlook, wise thinking, and a careful choice, you can prove that America's youth has not gone to the dogs, that their moral, spiritual, and educational standards are not being lowered." This point of view offers an interesting look into the crisis, suggesting that some white students refrained from engaging in the bullying. While the Little Rock Nine were still tortured by the majority of students, those who treated the black students equally set an important example for the students of the future, and equal treatment became more and more common as the years went by until it became a responsibility expected by all to uphold. In this way, Little Rock Central set an important model for the future of schools everywhere, as it showed education could still exist in a radically altered atmosphere. The ramifications of the Little Rock crisis are extremely important to take note of, as are the sacrifices required to get there. The newspaper's comment about the world watching was shown to be true, and images on the front of every newspaper showing armed forces staring down the small students brought out a bit more humanity in the heart of America. Media coverage of this event was extremely important to the future of the civil rights movement, as the average American slowly became more educated and accepting. In addition, this event established a responsibility of the President of the United States to support desegregation, no matter how high the stakes. This was hardly needed, however, as most supporters of school segregation saw Eisenhower's strength and just how willing he was to use force to protect the rights of those whose constitutional rights were at risk. It is because of these factors that Little Rock Central High School is now a National Historic Site, protected by the United States government to be a constant reminder of the mistakes and growths of the past. It is also for these reasons that the Little Rock Crisis was one of the most important events in the quest for civil rights.